Clarence Gandy, and I came to Huntsville in 1960. I'm originally from Meridian, Mississippi, but I met my husband Clarence Gandy at Fisk in Nashville, and we were both music majors, and I graduated in '59, and so did he. And I taught 1 year in South Carolina, then we married in 1960. And we married in Mississippi, and I guess we came here the next day. And I had been here 2 or 3 days before Susie P. Gandy, who was the choir director and the English teacher at that time. And my mother-in-law had me taking organ lessons. That's what stands out more than anything else. At Councill High School had just gotten a new organ. And at that time, of course, we had assembly every week, and you had to go, we used to call it chapel, you know, when they were private schools, they called it chapel. But it was assembly, and they had assembly once a week, and students had to come into assembly in line, nice and quiet and sit in their seats. And we had to play a prelude when they came in and a postlude when they went out. Well, of course, her new daughter-in-law had to learn how to play the organ if she was going to be there. Because in college, my parents could afford for me to take piano. I was a piano major. But they couldn't afford for me to take organ, too. So I had to learn how to play the organ. So I remember the first summer I was here, before I started teaching, I learned to play the organ. And we were taking organ lessons and getting ready to play for assembly. And of course, I became her accompanist for the choir. I accompanied, and I also taught elementary music, and I taught in the high school. I taught general music and music theory. 2 students, and I remember where my classroom was. It was in the elementary school area. It was in an old cloakroom. I think it was a long, narrow room, but it was a small room, but it was big enough for me to teach my students. I remember teaching general music or music theory. 2 students I really remember was Antoinette Snodgrass Wilson now, and Vicky Joyner. Okay. Yeah, I particularly remember they were very, very good music students, and of course they are good musicians today. Okay. And I taught elementary music also, and had great interaction with the elementary teachers, especially Mrs. Kendricks, Miss Comer, she's now Morgan, Miss Ward, and all of them. And so, and every year we had to give an operette in the spring. And so we prepared, I had to prepare the kids for the big operetta. And Miss Kendricks made costumes, and it was a whole school affair. And this was, I really had to step in and just learn how to teach, you know. In college, I didn't learn how to teach. I learned how on the job, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And so in '66, I believe, the school's last year was, what, 65?
66.
66, okay. In 66, okay, I taught, okay. At that time, I believe my son was born in '61. And I think you had to stay out a year after you had a child. And so I left, though, in '66. That's when I left to go to Nashville to graduate school, to Peabody. And thank goodness Sue and Gandy, my husband Clarence Gandy, he taught choral music over at Calvary Hill. Okay. And so Sue and Gandy took care of my son, and I left town and stayed in Nashville for a year in graduate school at George Peabody College for Teachers, okay, and got my master's there. When I came back, the school had closed. I mean, you know, it was integration had come. And so then I went down to teach music, choral music at Mountain Gap, which is way down on the south end. And the next year, I believe they closed Calvary Hill, I'm not sure, but my husband went to Grissom to be the choral teacher there. Okay. So I fed students to him from Mountain Gap. I fed him students at Grissom. And so most of my teaching career, basically, I did not teach, you know, many black students after Councill. I was teaching mostly white students. And I had a marvelous experience down there. I had no problems whatsoever. They accepted me with open arms. And some of my best friends today are the teachers and the students I met at Mountain Gap.
Some favorite memories you may have about your mother-in-law? You know how little things that was going on.
Yes, favorite
within
memories.
the family thing.
She would tell me so many stories about Huntsville, you know, and about different families, and so I learned quite a bit of Huntsville history about our African American history here in Huntsville from listening to her and telling me about you know, who this family was, with this family and this family and this family, both white and black, you know, she knew, because really on Adams Street we lived over just 2 blocks from where her ancestors were slaves. Oh. Her grandmother, Sue's grandmother, was a slave on Franklin Street, and in the I forget the name of the house, but the house is still there. And her father's folk were slaves in the house behind the Church of the Nativity. So on both sides, we were right down the street from where her ancestors were slaves. Right. And of course her father was postman. In the 30s and 40s, I didn't realize we had black postmen, you know, but we did here in Huntsville. We had 2 families of Powers. He was Clarence Powers, and there was another Powers gentleman, I can't think of his first name. He was also a postman, and Sue's father was a postman, and he was a horse and buggy postman. You know, he had the horse. Knew how to go just from house to house. She would tell me to stop and deliver the mail, and he did that in the 30s and 40s. And they lived on the corner of Seminole and Holmes, where the project is now. What is that?
Councill?
No, Benford. But not Benford.
Butler Terrace.
Butler Terrace, right. And they were displaced when the, what is it called? I can't think of the word, you know what it is. They had to move they had a farm, a house, big house out there. And so they had to move, do urban renewal. That's what I was trying to think. When they wanted to build that project, that was in 1950. So they moved to Adams Street, but before they moved to Adams Street, they lived in Dr. Scruggs' house. Now, Dr. Scruggs, who was the first black doctor here, and Scruggs Street Center is named after Dr. Scruggs. And I think most of the people my age and a little older, I think Dr. Scruggs was their doctor when they were born. And I don't know why, but I never learned exactly how Sue was related to Dr. Scruggs, but they were related to Dr. Scruggs, because when they had to move from their house over on Seminole and Holmes, they moved to Dr. Scruggs' house, which was down near Councill in the Grove that they call that. The house was in the Grove, and it was still there when I came, while they were building her house over on Adams Street. And they owned that property simply because one day her father, who was the postman, Clarence Powers, was up at Harrison Brothers hardware store, and Mr. Harrison told him that the property down on Adams Street was for sale due to taxes. And so he bought that land, and consequently, he died in 1950, but when his family had to move, they moved there on Adams Street. So that's the reason we were on Adams Street. And when my husband and I got ready to build, that was in '62, you know, it was we couldn't buy very few places where we could buy, so we built our house on her lawn.